And so so the next category was extracurriculars. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, more in depth with Rachel and like kind of what she looked for. This is just what Harvard's were. So obviously this is like a grain of salt and also not going to be the case of every school. You kind of want to adjust the expectation. I think you want to think about like a one or an outstanding score as you're the top 10 of like of applicants to that school, right? So hearing what other students have done that have gotten into that school, I think is always helpful, especially in your area. But you definitely don't want to do kind of a rinse and repeat thing or do what another student did. You just want to think about like the overall level of contribution. So yeah, I would say overall like contribution is a big one, impact, and then dedication. Like how much time do you put towards it? But again, we will talk about that in a moment. Like clickers, driving me nuts. Okay, and then we have the personal score, which is its own category. And a student who gets a one in a personal score is pretty rare for Harvard, but like it's something that I think what I take from this is that schools are telling us that who a student is as a person is a very important factor. And I think students don't think about that often. Sense of humor is something that I always am like, oh my gosh, I'll work with a student and be like, you're so funny. And I don't understand why you're afraid to put that any part of that into your application. Like all of the personality stuff goes towards the personal score. It doesn't have to be you overcame some big trauma. Like it's also just like, are you a joy to be around? And many students are, so many of my students are. But I think this is kind of the description of what an outstanding personal score gets at Harvard. Keep in mind, it's not just in the essays, it's in the recommendations. And it's also how a student spends their time. So extracurriculars kind of go into the personal score as well, because it goes towards kind of what a student's values are. Okay, now we're gonna get to the fun part. All right, so I'm just stop sharing my screen just so it's two of us here. And yeah, Rachel, thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know you have a busy schedule, but I
Yeah,
appreciate you sharing your wisdom. And yeah, I'm hoping that if anyone does have any questions, feel free to sound them off in the chat. But I have some questions that I started with for you, and we can
sure.
kind of just have an open conversation. So, okay, you already kind of told us about like the capacity of your role. So I guess to start with, like, let's do this. Like, tell me what was the process from like beginning to end? Like, what was your experience
Sure.
reviewing a typical application?
So, one thing I actually want to go back a little bit further on is a thing that I really valued that NYU did is they recognize that it's this massive machine, right? And that the tough thing about that many applications is they know that you put so much time and energy and passion into these applications. How do you give it the time it deserves? You can't give it the time it deserves, but how do you maximize the time you can give it on an individual level? Because even with the numbers and the evaluations that we put on it, it does end up being holistic in that each lever is influenced by other levers, right? It's one of the reasons I love that Kate brought up comedy is like every year I will have students who are so funny, so passionate, so excited about something, and they've created an app or they want to create an app that tempers that makes them sound very professional. Professional is a very hard thing to get across as the most professional person they see in 120 thousand applications at NYU. So the first thing that we did was a week and a half of 8-hour long days of training in person as the readers with all of the admissions officers so that we could review application after application and talk about the values of the school, talk about what they were aiming for and what they wanted to, what the current makeup of the school was, and how they felt like that was a match with their
Mm,
institutional values, or where they felt like they were falling short and wanted to bolster another type of of representation, with whether it be, we want more engineering students here, and we feel like they don't have to worry about that. They've got tenure. Uh, Gallatin has been really heavily focused toward the arts. What is it like to have an individualized school program that isn't necessarily only humanities? So things like
Mhm.
that, very specific for the program. So after that, it was awesome. It was really lovely to
That's
hear
so
the
cool.
admissions officers get to talk about it for that amount of time. Because the other thing that happened at the reading at that level, which doesn't happen at every other school, is there are students that get accepted or rejected directly from that first reader evaluation. If you are an automatic, if you're Simone Biles applying to NYU, you're probably going to get through with that first reader. And I do say to my students, that is the level that we're talking about at this point. If you are an Olympic champion, chances are it's going to go well for you. Uh, there are almost no other automatic guarantees. That also being said, if there is absolutely no demonstration that you can handle the academic rigor of the program that I'm reading for, it will likely be an automatic reject or a screen before you even go to the committee. The rest of my job was to evaluate things that I found really singular about this person from their application, be it their extracurriculars, their personal story, the things that they wanted to spend time on, whether eventually in their professional lives or exclusively in their undergraduate lives, so that I could evaluate and disseminate that information and send it off.
Oops. Hold on. We might have lost her briefly. Hold on. She'll be back. Let's see. Sorry, everybody. I think that was a possibly incredibly enthusiastic hand wave that logged her off.
I'm so
Oh my
sorry,
gosh.
friends. No, it's Con Ed is still having some trouble
Oh
up in my area
no. Oh my
post
gosh.
snowstorm. So sorry
Sorry.
about that, everybody.
All
Uh,
good, all good.
So, uh, what I would end up doing when I finally got my batch of students is that I would become very familiar with the guidance counselors and the course offerings at each individual school in my region so that I could appropriately evaluate how rigorous the classes were, how the extracurriculars compared based on what I know was available to the students. And then the rest of my time after those initial, this is the score I give your SAT, ACT, this is the score I give if that was applicable, which is changing quite a bit from school to school right now and year to year. This is the score I want to give you based on the academic rigor. This is the score extracurricularly. Is there anything of note or any red flags, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit? And beyond that, what do I want to tell you beyond just creating some sort of numerical score on the personal vector? And that's where I spent the bulk of my time, is the stuff that you're not going to get from that one sheet right off the bat.
Right.
This student loves X thing to a degree I haven't seen in any other application, and I want you to know about it.
Cool. So you're doing kind of written like almost profiles or
Yes.
like little blurbs about them that you
Yes,
feel kind of like advocates for them.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And those blurbs, they change the language every year, but the blurbs would also contain language like strongly recommend and accept, strongly
Right.
recommend or reject, like things like that, as well. But I would have to show my work there and explain why, if, for example, the scores might look a little lower in some categories, I still thought it was a strongly recommend to accept based on the program and the profile of the student.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess you kind of hinted at this, but so when it comes to extracurriculars, I feel like a lot of students will be like, they'll say, I don't have enough, or I don't know what to do. And they kind of often feel like they have to pad or trump up things that they've done. So
Yeah.
what really stands out to you in terms of an extracurricular profile?
For me, demonstrated passion
Yeah.
in a specific area. One of my favorite admissions officers at Harvard always used to say that there's that they were very interested in well-rounded students, and I want to talk about that a little bit. But also, they loved a well-lopsided student, and I've always stuck with that. Is I find that students have a tendency to be able to shine a little bit more in talking about the things that they're excited about when they're talking about the thing about which they are well lopsided. That um, I don't. This is with the 2 cents grain of salt of I'm just one person. For my money, being a well-rounded, well extracurricular generalist who is undeclared and unspecific to where they're going to pursue is a very and how they're and where they're going to pursue it and what they're going to pursue is a much harder admit at the selective schools than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Not, I will not say impossible because that's not how this game works, but I don't have great advice for you if you're like, you know what, I like school and I just want to see what's out there. That's awesome. That's wonderful. You're going to get into a great school. I can't necessarily tell you that you're going to have great odds at one of the top tier schools.
Hmm.
Now, one of my personal bugbears when it comes to admissions is that's okay because there are so many extraordinary schools. And I do think that we want to be, for my money, turning down the heat a little bit on it's important for you to get into the most selective school available to you. It's awesome if you can get into the most selective school available to you that you're excited about going to. But if you're excited about going to a specific place, it should be because of a specific program that makes your heart race a little bit and not just because you know Yale is hard. It's very difficult to write the essays on that and to make a good case on why that's valuable.
No,
So,
100%.
so
Yeah.
what stands out for me in extracurriculars? I think if you're an Olympian and if you're an international or nationally recognized something, that's going to stand out right away. Beyond that, that's not good advice for anybody, right? Like that's a very one in
Yeah.
a, that's not, you can't aim toward that. Beyond that, the thing I'm looking for is were you able to take advantage of the things around you in your community, the things that were available to you with your time in your specific um, family situation, city situation, regional situation, whatever that looked like for you. If that was a job, that since you were old enough to have a part-time job because you're one of the people who contributes to your family that way, I'm not going to say, well, why weren't you doing X,
Right.
X program at the national level? But I want to hear you talk about that job. I want to
Hmm.
hear you talk about the circumstances that required that to be how you've spent your time in school. And if you can talk about that vividly and talk about why that's important to you or why you hate it and don't ever want to do that job again, I'm going to know what to say about you in a very different way.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's often there are going to be many well-rounded kids like there, and I think I'm always like, well, but there's only one of you, right?
Yeah.
And so like let's move with the stuff that only you have. And every student has something like that. I think they just always think it's not appropriate or like not the right thing to center in an application. But that's where a lot of the fun stuff happens. Like I think I one of my kids wrote his essay about how much he hates making his bed. It was like this fight that he had with his mom
Those are
over
the best
time.
every year. I would
Yeah.
much rather that than the enforced need to. You don't. One of my other kind of not pet peeves, but what I will beg and plead every year is none of these institutions are owed your trauma, and I would prefer you and frankly most of them. If there's something in your life you feel the need to talk about because it is central to who you are, there will be opportunities to in this application. But chances are there are other things that have happened to you that would bring you more joy to talk about that tell me a little bit more about who
Yeah.
you're going to be on campus.
Yeah. 100%. So I mean we're getting to the essay. So what would you say, what are you looking for in an essay, or what are some memorable essays that you've seen?
This past year, I had a big fight would be strong, but a big long-term discussion with a family because one of the students had gotten something like a top 0.001% score over the last couple of years on the video game Marvel Rivals. And I thought that was so cool. This student had exceptional grades. This student had exceptional, I mean, they were published in the sciences. They wanted to work in tech
Yeah.
research. and sustainable business. You know who I'm talking about. And
Yeah, I do. I
uh,
do.
they were
Yeah.
great. And there was a deep concern because they were applying to several of these really selective schools. MIT was a big one, a bunch of the kind of usual suspects, that the Marvel Rivals essay made him sound flimsy. And it's like, look at the rest of his. I already know how good he
I
is.
know.
He could code stuff that was so far beyond the level that could have necessarily been expected based on what was available to him. His academic, bona fides were like, he was a published author at this point and researcher.
Yeah.
Cool. That's so awesome. Believe it or not, MIT has a bunch of those people applying, and there aren't that many among those applicants who've beaten this kid as Spider-Man and Marvel Rivals. So I would love to read that essay. There is one that I thought about for I still think about because it's been several years at NYU, and it was frankly right on the bubble, right on the line, academic rigor in terms of availability. This was very clearly somebody who, a first gen college kid, had not had any help with the app, a lot of kind of like typos and things like that. I tend not to, and most people I would say who are readers and admissions officers tend to overlook a lot of those in a lot of different programs. Not every program, but there's a real recognition that if you're doing this application by yourself, that already there are circumstances there that mean I want to hear about who you are and I'm not automatically screening you out. They wrote an essay about their favorite breakfast cereal that they were eating under the covers at 3 a.m. while writing me this essay telling me about what they thought they wanted to study at NYU. Um, I don't know if this student got in. I do know that I sent it to the committee and said, read this essay and you reject them because I'm not doing it. Like, I'm not doing it.
Oh,
I think that
wow.
I want to know what this student feels like. And this is the kind of take home that this, I think, dovetails with what you were saying before, Kate, is another admissions officer that I love this man would say the only criteria once we've covered all of the like, could you do the work? Do we think that you could fit in terms of what's available here and take advantage? The only criterion that mattered was if I sat down next to you in the dining hall, would I be glad I did?
Hmm.
And I love that one because it is not just the coolest person at the party. It's about talk to me about what you're up to and talk to me about what it means to you and
Yeah.
talk to me about what classes you're excited to go to later in the day. Those are inevitably the ones that stay with me more than anything else. There's also a huge amount in 650 words of opportunity for you to touch on the other things, the skills and things you've learned along the way, maybe some of the traumas and some of the things that have your humanity is going to come out in this application. So talk to me about what gets you up in the morning.
Amazing. Yeah, I completely agree. I love that question. I think that's like, I think Stanford, someone, or I think it was hard. They had, so yeah, what kind of roommate would the student be? I
Mhm.
mean, that's a prompt. That's an essay prompt at some of the more selective schools, like write a letter
Yeah.
to your roommate. It's
Yeah,
something they're
Northwestern
really
has
interested.
right a yeah.
Yeah, which is a hard one. I'm like, oh,
Every year
but
that one is
yeah,
tricky because it feels like a trap. It feels like,
it does.
I guess, tell your future roommate what you'll be like. And it's like, oh, I'll be studying. And,
Yeah, I'll be
it feels
studying the whole
like,
time and not doing anything else. Totally.
yeah. It feels like a trap, but it's not. They're
Yeah,
just trying to find any way possible through this massive applications to know who you are as a person.
100%. Um, Thank you for that. That's amazing. We have a really good question. I just want to make sure we can get to it. So,
Yeah.
Jackson just asked this. So, he's asking, so what's your advice on timing for the application process? Many schools have early action and regular decision. And can you explain how this factors into basically results, like decisions made, admits, and all that stuff?
Yeah, I think it depends by school. I
Yep.
think if you are certain it has remained true the entire time I've been doing this, which is almost 2 decades, including my undergrad work. It is 2 decades with my undergrad work, um, which is really um, the only thing that the only way that I can say, do you want to apply to this place early is if they called tomorrow and said, stop writing all your other applications, you're going here. Would you be glad? Or would you say, oh, I wish I'd found out whether or not Miami said yes. I wish I'd
Right.
found out whether Hamilton said yes. If the answer is like, nope, yep, I don't want to do any more, I would go there tomorrow because of this program and this program, then I think it's a great opportunity to apply early. I think if you're not sold on any of those places, then I think early action is typically a better course. And for me, the difference there is you know your own schedule and you know senior year and you know what time you have available better than I do, better than the
Hmm.
college does, better than your school does, because every student is unique. So you do get a little bit more of a runway to make different plans on the early schedule. But you shouldn't lock yourself in anywhere either as a Hail Mary. I don't see that working very often. I'm far below the test scores and the
Yeah.
academic rigor and the extracurriculars of Harvard, but oh, let's just throw it in to try it. It'll be an automatic rejection, partially because the as Kate said, the applicants not just for these selective colleges but for early decision are frequently self-selecting. If you're applying early, it's because you know your stats are already going to look impressive among this group of people. So let's just see what they say.
Hmm.
I can't think of any particular places where I've seen points where I've seen that work for a student who is scoring significantly below on all of these other factors. Low extracurriculars, lower grades and rigor, low SAT scores or no SAT scores. Let's just throw an application into Princeton will not work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we see it every year because we
We
start
do.
thinking like, oh, well, I'll just apply to 20 colleges and let's find out.
Right. Right. Which is, I mean, even that, I don't think people understand the workload of that. So I'm like,
Mass.
there is no
No,
throwing your application into Harvard really, because you still have to
no.
do these really thoughtful supplemental essays that a lot of kids have been working on for months and months. So
And
I mean,
as,
oh, go
one
ahead.
other thing I would just add to that is that the schools that sometimes parents think of as an easier get really require a little bit more evaluation and research in 2026
Yes.
because every year there will be students whose parents go, well, I went to XYZ school, or we know a lot of people going into the XYZ school in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. We know that that's one she'll definitely get into. Please check on them. These things change, and the numbers have increased at many places.
Yeah.
So selectivity is something to take a look at there. It's not just the Harvards, MITs, and Princetons.
Yeah, and I think this is one thing. I know Jackson, I think we got a lot of juniors here. One thing that I would do definitely at this point is sit down with a guidance counselor, get into Naviance, and look at your admission scatter plot. I think you have to always start with data, and the most regional focused data you have to say, okay, kids like with this score, got accepted to the X school, and you just can see a little bit more accurate information. I don't think there are really many good admissions chancing tools online outside of that, because they go often by national averages. So the very first thing you want to do is like obviously one, this should be an exciting time because you have so many choices if you're a junior, and you should be looking at like liberal arts colleges and like, more techie schools, like research universities, and coming from a place of like, what do I like? Um, and then yeah, just take a look at the data. Like it's just the numbers are what they are. And there's so many good schools, truly. Like so many great schools where I think students end up like being able to find where they are suited to go. I think they kind of find their way typically. Um, but I guess if you're like looking for where, well, we might not get to the timeline, but if you're looking for, okay, I'm a junior and should I try to target early action? Like what my steps are now, what would you recommend, Rachel?
Learning as much as you can about the college
Yeah,
and specifically the program, because I think that that's the other thing that I don't see as much of, and then it can sort of feel like cramming, which is
yeah,
um, it also depends on the sort of thing. Every year I'll get students who say, I really want to do business, so I'm looking at Emory. And
right,
it's like applying to Emory on if you're on the bubble with the academics is going to be a lot trickier than if you're like, I've always wanted to do literature and there I know there's this one professor at Emory.
right,
You're already going to be in a very different category. So all of these things are very specific. I was a student who studied theater at Harvard. I was very happy there. I would be absolutely lying to you if I didn't say that I recognize my chances were very different. My profile was very different than a student who was saying, I specifically want to show up and study pre-med and
Right.
study engineering. The programs are specific and looking for students. So finding some of these sleeper schools that have a really exciting program in the thing you're excited about can be a great way to find selectivity in a school that you might not have immediately thought about. Because what we end up doing is going, oh, X school is very selective and I think it's a cool campus. And every year I feel like there's a million. NYU has a thing that says their question is, other than our New York City location, why do
Yeah.
why do you want to go to NYU? Because if you write, I've always wanted to live in New York City, I've learned nothing.
Yeah.
I've learned nothing. If you know about the program, the people, the things you could study there, if you say to me, I mean, every year, NYU had X number of other campuses, Shanghai, Abu
Yeah.
Dhabi, all that, London and Paris. And every year it was like, would you go to any others? And people would go, oh, London and Paris. And you're like, okay, do you know what's there or do you just think that those are cool places? But if a kid showed up and said, I really want to go to Shanghai, I know this professor's there, I speak X language, unless they were failing a class, they were probably going to get in
Hmm.
because that student is applying in a very different pool than a student who says, I want to go to Gallatin because I think I want to study a little of everything, which is not actually what a school of specialized instruction is for. It's about saying, I want to study the concept of leadership from these five schools, and I'm going to create my own curriculum together. So I need a degree from Gallatin. So
Yeah.
the number one thing I think if you're curious about early, learn the programs and not just, okay, it's in Ann Arbor and I know that they have a good business program. Like, tell me what you're excited about and how you are going to fit into it there.
Yeah. And I think there's always something to find for the most part. I think that's what you got to challenge yourself with the work of doing that early on because if it's
Mhm.
not there, you want to know, right? And I think we need to like do the work of saying, what are my non-negotiables in terms of a program? And what do I have like to offer a program as well? Where's the fit? And approach it that way. And if it's not a fit, it's not going to be a fit, you know? And it's that's something they really do look at. And I've had students who I feel like have maybe are a little bit lower on the academic index, but just are like, I want to be a music minor and a computer science major, and I want to be a music production minor, and not every school has that. And it's just like, oh, you've actually done the research rather than being like, that's a beautiful campus.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But this is a really good question from Rhiannon. So, Rhiannon asked, how critical is it for the student to reach out to email and speak to admissions counselors at the schools they're applying to?
It depends on the school, which is true for
Yes.
almost everything you're going to ask tonight. That being
Yeah.
said, I can think of no downsides. I can
Yeah.
think of no downsides. I always encourage my students to reach out. You will have a dedicated counselor, whether it's the region, the high school, the city, or the school. Excuse me, I think I said that twice. You'll have a dedicated counselor who can ask. You can ask questions of specifically. Try to stay within the bounds of stay within the bounds of like courtesy and not just the way you speak to them, but if you ask 60 100 questions,
Yeah.
that's not very courteous. But if you're reaching out to say it's this and I've kept up with this, a lot of the top selective schools will say after you've applied, certainly, like, please don't reach out with every update. There will be one kind of mid-year
Opportunity.
update, an opportunity to fill them in on anything that's happened in the interim. And I think that's a great way to utilize that. And beyond that, I love having students send an email before they apply, after they go to the info session online, because I think you should go to the info session online for that demonstrated interest, just because you don't know. These metrics are changing every year, and a lot of schools
Yeah.
do care about those, especially the smaller ones. And then after they apply, I don't think that that is an overload of these overworked people at all. And I think so. Mission critical, like, yeah, I think communication, it demonstrates a maturity and a communication that they are going to be looking at.
Hmm.
Will it get you over the hump if you haven't scored well and done well in your classes? Like, no. But do I think it's an important thing they want? If they say to you, "Welcome to, um, you know, University of Boulder," they want you to say yes back. That's a massive thing for them. That's
Yeah.
massive. So it's important that you suggest to them that if you say yes to me, I'm going to say yes to you.
Yeah, I mean, also there's just it's such a good it's a really important skill set. I feel like even with job like getting jobs later, just being really on top of communications with whoever you're trying to kind of woo, I guess,
Yeah.
whether it's a school or a new job. Like I just it's a really good thing to get in the habit of. And I think that it's like a skill that you need to have just for life. Um, Obviously, like every school does tell you if they track demonstrate interest or not, but there's just not a single downside, I don't think, to like following them on social media, like keeping in touch, giving updates sparingly and respectfully, but substantive ones, asking substantive questions. I just think there's not any, I don't know, not any world in which that is a bad thing.
One thing I wish more students took advantage of is reaching out directly to professors and folks on
Yeah.
campus who do the thing they're excited about. I can't promise that that's going to change the odds of your application, but it certainly happens. If you're applying to a specific program, music production is actually a great example of one, right? It's
Yeah, yeah.
niche. Not every school has it. If you have a, hey, I've been doing this on my own, here are some of the things, or can I send you some samples of some I've been working on? I think your class is in this and this and this. If you don't hear back, you don't hear back. But if you do, all of a sudden there's a connection in that department. Odds are good, don't ask, but odds are good that person's going to reach out to admissions.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely don't ask though. That's very good. That's a
Don't
good
Yeah, please don't ask them to
caveat.
speak on your behalf. But you
Yeah.
can certainly say in the why Bennington essay or whatever. I don't even know if Bennington does that, but
Yeah.
I've in my research for this, I've been excited to strike up a conversation with Professor Boop Boop Boop, who focuses on XYZ that I've been doing for the last 2 years.
Yeah. It helps you
Ta-da!
write the
Sold.
Y essay. The Y essay is written, which is the worst part of the essay
100%.
development process, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Amazing. Another person asked, Michelle, how critical is it that a student ranks nationally in a high school extracurricular? And will not doing so severely damage their chances of admission?
It can be a really important kind of game changer. It can be if you work at the national international level, but it's not going to severely damage if you're not.
Mm.
If you're doing nothing and don't have a good excuse is strong, but like if you can't tell me how you're spending your hours outside of school at all, I'm
Yeah.
going to that it will be very difficult to make any sort of impact in the selective schools, and I'm gonna want to know why. Entirely because it's going to make me go, well, what are you going to do on campus?
Hmm.
That's entirely it. You do not need to be the best XYZer in the world. You don't need to be that high up at Marvel Rivals. But if you are, however you spend your time, whether structured or unstructured, and I think that's really mission critical, is important. And please tell me about it. There's no national ranking for a person who's obsessed with romance novels and has actually read thousands of them and blah 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 blah. Guess what? I want to know if that's you. I really do. Even though they didn't give you an award for it, I now have a little bit better of an idea of who you're going to be on campus, and I'm excited about you in the English department.
Yeah. Is that something that you recommend going in? Because obviously there are different avenues that could go in. Like you could put that in the extracurricular section, right, on the Common App. You could write an essay about it. Would you recommend doing one or the other or both or
It de-
what's
it depends how central to your story it is.
yeah.
I think an essay about it, if it's the thing you want to write about. If you're really torn between things, I think putting it as an extracurricular is so rad. I love when students put an
Me too.
extracurricular that isn't like um run by a school thing at all. Oh, I specifically do street photography. I specifically do
Yeah.
fashion street photography. I go out in my school and I have an X website about it. That's gotten a little dicier because people are just throwing websites together. But um, uh, it doesn't have to be sanctioned by a teacher to be a genuine extracurricular, and you being on student council is not necessarily more impressive.
Hmm. Do some of those kind of in-school activities as a reader, like in your experience, do you find like I've always been genuinely curious about this. Do you
Yeah.
find those ones that every school has like not as impressive simply because of
It's
how
not that
common they are or what is like
I
or are you
don't
just like this
find
is
them.
another good marker?
It's a good marker that you're involved in
Yeah.
your community. I want
Yeah.
to know what you're doing there.
Right.
And if you have 9 or so 1 hour a week activities, and I'm already having a hard time kind of pinning down what you're most excited about on campus or for this program or as a student, that can be a little unhelpful. I
Hmm.
think in general, unless you're really crushing Model UN, unless you are the class president or the president of student council, and here's what you've done with it, it's a little easier to gloss over. It's not that those things are ever bad, but I do think the days of, wow, look at this person, they're doing 12 things every day after school, that's a harder thing for me to go, wow, 12 things like that. It looks less impressive because there's a world where it starts to look, especially for generalists who are applying, or students who read as generalists, as like, yep, they went to all the
Right.
required things they were supposed to be requiredly at, and they did amazing there.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I think one thing you've probably gotten really keen at, and I feel like even just not being in an admissions office, but just reading the amount of essays I've read and applications I've read, you get pretty keen on detecting what feels really perfunctory or feels like,
Yeah.
I had to do something, so I did this, or like I had to do
Yes, totally.
research, so I did this. And so, I think like a key takeaway I hope tonight is just like that stuff is really helpful, and that is a good like extracurriculars, really diving in and finding something you truly love is going to be very helpful to your application. It's just don't forget the you of all of it, right? Like if you're in student council, I think the thing I'm always telling students is, well, that looks different at every single school. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
But I don't really know what that means. You have to tell me. Like otherwise I'm
Yeah.
just gonna be like, oh, okay. So maybe an hour a week. Like I don't even know. So we're running up on time. I know you have an 8 o'clock, Rachel. Any last questions? Everyone sound off. I would figured we were gonna run out of time on going over tested stuff, but we're gonna have a special offer for folks. But the last thing I want to ask you is, so if you could give one piece of advice to a student who's starting their application right now, we've got a lot of juniors in the house.
Mhm.
What advice would you give them?
Start by opening up a blank piece of paper or a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word doc or a Notes app. Love it as a Notes
Love it,
app. Love
notes
it as
app.
a text exchange with yourself.
Yeah.
Love it. Do every year. We'll start on the Notes app. I really do believe, maybe because I want to, but I also think it's useful here that the college app process is also useful in 2026 because it's one of the first time in a lot of students' lives where they get to take a beat and go, how's it been going and what do I want to do next? Like if I
Yeah.
had to put my values in one place, if I had to tell you what I'm excited about in the morning, what's been tricky for me, what I'm excited for next, what I don't know next, what are those things? What are my stories so far? And like what do I want them to be moving forward? What do I value? Um, Free write. Free write on that. Who am I so far? It's an
Hmm.
opportunity to ask yourself and evaluate like where you're at in life. And we don't get a million of those in life. So it's nice that you get to do this one because then this process gets to be about telling about yourself holistically. This is who I am. This is what I care about. This is what I want to do next, maybe. Or this is maybe what I know I don't want to do next. Or this is where I want to do it, maybe. If you start from a place of those stories, the essays are going to come out of that.
Yep.
My deep recommendation is to free write, put a little timer on. I recognize for ADHD Army in this or any webinar, I am with you. Set an actual timer, have somebody change your passwords, and just start free writing on that. But
Yeah.
also write it in the language you would write to somebody you love or care about, and not to a faceless admissions officer you're trying to impress. Start by writing it to somebody you love to talk to. Do a voice memo if it's easier. That language will get us so much further, and we can always polish or make sure it's admission or game day appropriate much later. You're not there yet. Start writing down your stories to start, would be my advice.
That's exactly what I say too. I feel validated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it just takes out the part where it's like trying to sound impressive. It's like we're just
Yeah.
not there yet. No one's gonna see this. Like I love the voice dictation trick. That's always really good.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
well, Rachel, thank you. And everybody, thank you who stuck around. We got a pretty full house still, so appreciate it. Just before we go, I'm gonna drop my consultation link. It's free on offer to everybody here. Our prices are going up for advising in February. So everyone who's here, if you book a call with me. We can talk about like a discounted rate for you, especially if you are working with us already. You would get to work with amazing advisors like Rachel who just have incredible experience and very, very happy families who come back to her every year. So thank you all. Have a wonderful good night. And I'm going to drop my email here too in case anyone has any further questions. But I will let everyone go. And yeah, thanks.
Thanks all. Nice meeting you. Good night, Kate.
Good night.